Well, good Thursday morning, everyone. Have you been enjoying this week? I feel really challenged with the topics that we have been talking about. These are the values that our pastor Andy Wood delineated that he would like in all of our Saddleback staff. And certainly as we interview for new staff, these are values that we're looking for. The reason they relate to us all, they're all biblical. They're all things that you and I, staff or otherwise, just walking with Jesus, we would want in our lives. And the one we come to today is number 4. We value generosity and we live and lead with open hands. We value generosity. Honestly, this is one that I don't struggle with as much as some of the others, actually. From me sharing why that's true, I just realized that all I have comes from God anyway. I've held a lot of jobs in my life, and those paid me. But the reality is the skills or the abilities to do those jobs came as gifts from God. And so I acknowledge that he is the one who's given me everything. And on top of that, obviously everything in the earth belongs to the Lord. The whole thing belongs to the Lord. He created it and it is his. So he does allow us to use some of those items. And so I always just view our lives as we are stewards, good stewards, hopefully, of all that God has loaned to us. Because you know what? You and I are not taking it with us. John D. Rockefeller's secretary, when asked about how, after he died, she was famously asked, well, how much money did he leave? And she said, all of it. I don't know if that story's true. I think it is. I've heard it many times. But we can't take it with us. So it belongs to the Lord. Now, here's the 3 scriptures with that in mind. Number 1, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he will fill your barns with grain and your vats will overflow with good wine. That's found in Proverbs chapter 3 at verses 9 and 10. So that's the general guideline that you and I should live by. Honor the Lord with your wealth and the best part of everything you produce. So when Andy and Saddleback asks us that, or says that we value generosity, well, that certainly means that we start with tithing. It's an honor and a privilege to get to give God back 10%. 10%. I've always thought, since it all belongs to the Lord, that's what the guideline. But if there are opportunities to give more or to help someone else out, it's not always giving to an institution or giving to the church or giving to a mission organization. It can be helping out your fellow church member or even a neighbor, because we have open hands. We have generosity, and if the money is needed elsewhere, we should be willing to help out. Now, here's a couple of verses that actually apply this to life, or observes people doing that. The first one is found in Acts chapter 4, and you can read the whole passage, but in verse 32, it says this: all the believers, the church is brand new. In Acts 4, the church is brand new. Because it's not that long after Pentecost and when the church began. All the believers were united in heart and mind, and they felt that what they owned was not their own, so they shared everything they had. And if you read a little further on, it says, so no one had any needs because the needs were met. The needs were met by other fellow believers. They were being generous. Day one of the church, being generous with what they had. And the world saw it, and the church boomed ahead. And many, many came to Christ. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. And of course, not the least of which is that in those very early days, a lot of the people who had seen eyewitnesses of the risen Lord were still alive. And I think that's the primary reason that the church grew so fast. But another one is that the believers were being so generous with their money. Hey, I wanted to mention a verse that is often quoted, and it's misquoted, and it's quoted out of context. And I know you know this verse. People love quoting it. And it's in Philippians chapter 4 at verse 19. Do you know that verse? You'll recognize it. I know you will. My God will meet all your needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus. Now, so often that verse, when it's even preached on, they concentrate on the word will meet all your needs. And then they'll say, not all your wants. But I don't think that's the biggest thing about this verse that you need to be aware of. It's an important part for sure. But the biggest fact is you got to ask yourself, to whom was Paul making this promise? And God's through him. He's giving it to the Philippian church. The Philippian church. And why is that important? Because the Philippian church is who is generous with him. In Philippians chapter 4 at verse 15, Paul writes, and this is the context for that famous verse. And he says, moreover, as you Philippians know, in the early days of your acquaintance with the gospel, in other words, when your church first started, from early on, and then Paul goes on, when I set out for Macedonia, not one church shared with me in the matter of giving and receiving, except for you. When Paul was going on his missionary journey, only one church on that trip, at least, supported him and partnered with him by giving. What church? The Philippian church. And Paul notes that, except for you. When I was in Thessalonica, you sent me aid again and again whenever I was in need. What a giving, generous church. And he says later on, the gifts that you sent, they are a fragrant offering and an acceptable sacrifice that is pleasing to God. Paul could not say enough about this giving, generous church. And they had an outreach heart. They wanted to support Paul as their missionary, to starting new churches all over the place. And Paul noted it and recognized it. And to them, in that context, to a giving, generous church, he says, and my God will meet all your needs according to his generous riches in Christ Jesus. I think it's important to note that promise is to a generous church and the same promise to generous people. May we value generosity. God bless. I'll see you again tomorrow.
Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give